Chapter 10. This was one night when the minutes did not torture me. I just held Bella in my arms and breathed in the smell of her strawberry-scented hair, inhaled the fiery scent of her blood, reveled in the sweet aftermath of our love. The euphoric high did not fade. If anything, it continued to grow as Bella lay sleeping with her head resting on my shoulder. Tonight had been so perfect. Bella had awoken in tears, but after what we shared, she slept peacefully with a seraphic smile upon her lips. I twitched with pleasure as I thought about how I had put that smile there. I would willingly forego every other activity or diversion for the rest of eternity, just to spend another night with Bella. For the first time ever, I was frustrated by Bella's human needs. I had no requirements for sleep, food, water, or even air. Between vampires, the pleasure of your partner could be, quite literally, your only focus for days at a time, without interruption. The thought released a painful need within me. I would have to keep a stranglehold on my body. As long as Bella was a frail human, I would never fully release control. Knowing Bella, I did not doubt that there would be a next time. She had been unyieldingly persistent all week. With my recent lapse of control, she was definitely not going to give up on future entanglements. The promise of that forthcoming moment left a smile glued to my lips, long after the light of dawn brightened the eastern sky. It was late morning before I sensed Bella returning to consciousness. I was lying with my hands clasped behind my head. As I stared at the ceiling, I felt the subtle change in her heartbeat, and a tiny hitch in her otherwise steady breathing. Minutes passed. What was she thinking? In the light of day, did she feel differently about things now? She had never explained her dream, or the emotional breakdown that followed. I was still baffled by the collapse of her normally calm demeanor. What had she dreamed about that elicited such a dramatic reaction? Bella's eyes opened part way. She examined my expression from beneath the veil of her lashes, then propped herself up on her elbows to fix me with a pensive stare. "How much trouble am I in?" Her voice was small and timid. I immediately felt guilty, that she was expecting reprisal from me, her husband. She was afraid of my anger. I had been such a tyrant, insisting that I knew better, that my fears should rule our relationship. The audacity and pure folly of my actions over the last week burned deep in my stomach. With Bella feeling so anxious, a humorous response was the most likely way to put her at ease swiftly, and incidentally stem the rising tide of guilt within me. "Heaps." My tone was cold, but my eyes flickered over to meet hers. I smirked to let her know I was only joking. She breathed a small sigh of relief. "I am sorry. I didn't mean... Well, I don't know exactly what that was last night." She was shaking her head slowly from side to side. Shadows of bewilderment and pain flickered across her face. "You never did tell me what your dream was about." I hoped to draw Bella out in conversation. I was determined to solve this particular riddle. Her answering blush was more descriptive than her words. "I guess I never did, but I sort of showed you what it was about." She fantasized about me? About us together? I blinked. Oh, interesting. This was a shocking revelation for me. Less than 2 years ago, Bella had confessed to never having felt physical or emotional attraction to another person. I had been so relieved to hear of her virginity. The purity of her mind and soul were further magnified by the innocence of her body. Rather than being disturbed that I had been the catalyst for such a transformation, I was deeply satisfied. Some primal instinct within me, held over from my few short years as human, thrilled at the knowledge that Bella was mine, and only mine, in every way that mattered. "It was a very good dream," she murmured. I was still lost in thought. A very good dream indeed. "Am I forgiven?" The humble tone brought me back to the present. "I'm thinking about it, and many other things." She said that we were on the beach. Perhaps I could help make that dream a reality. Bella began sitting up, but swayed violently and flopped back against the pillow. "Whoa, head rush." I wrapped my arms around her, immediately concerned. but trying not to stifle her if she needed air. "You slept for a long time, 12 hours." It seemed like a reasonable explanation for the brief bout of dizziness. I was sure she was hungry, or even dehydrated. 12? She was bewildered. She had expended more than the usual amount of energy last night. I watched as she furtively assessed her body, and glanced rapidly around the bedroom. She stretched her arms and legs, gingerly at first, but then with more enthusiasm. "Is the inventory complete?" Did she really think I couldn't figure out what she was doing? One didn't have to read minds to understand her sheepish behavior.
"The pillows all seem to have survived."
She nodded twice. The barest hint of a blush tinged her cheeks a warm rose. I couldn't resist. I loved to tease her, always waiting to see if she would respond with a darker blush, a swift retort, or even biting sarcasm. Bella's quick wit was one of her most fascinating traits. It illustrated her intelligence and strength of character, even when mortified with embarrassment. "Unfortunately, I can't say the same for your nightgown." I nodded in the direction of our feet, where several pitiful scraps of lace were all that remained of Bella's sexy lingerie.
"That's too bad. I like that one."
How could I disagree? I did too. If Alice had foreseen last night, and I wasn't sure that she had not, the little manipulator, she couldn't have made a more, appropriate? Was definitely not the right word, but I was at a loss for words right now. I was remembering the sight of Bella stepping into our bedroom again. I shifted uncomfortably and concentrated on Bella's words.
"Were there any other casualties?"
Her voice hesitated before the word casualties. I immediately thought of the pillows and the headboard. "I'll have to buy Esme a new bed frame," I confessed unwillingly. She followed my gaze as I looked over my shoulder at the mangled wood. My fingers had crushed and clawed through 3 inches of thick koa during the peak of my ecstasy.
You'd think I would have heard that."
There was a small crease between her eyebrows as she took in the destroyed headboard. "You seem to be extraordinarily unobservant when your attention is otherwise involved." Ah, yes, there was that brilliant blush. The warmth of her blood radiated from her crimson cheeks.
"I was a bit absorbed,"
she muttered. "I'm really going to miss that," I sighed, brushing her face gently with my fingertips. Electricity ran through my fingers, down my arm, and exploded in my core. I was lost in her eyes, searching for nothing, just content to drink in their warmth.
"How are you feeling?"
she asked suspiciously. I laughed at her funny expression.
"What?"
She demanded an explanation for my high spirits. "You look so guilty, like you've committed a crime." In reality, she looked more like the cat who had gotten into the larder and was confronted by the cook with cream still on her whiskers.
"I feel guilty."
"So you seduced your all-too-willing husband. That's not a capital offense." Her cheeks were aflame with embarrassment now.
"The word seduced implies a certain amount of premeditation."
She was starting to sound defensive. Perhaps I had pushed a little too hard. "Maybe that was the wrong word," I admitted. Her face was regaining its normal color as she looked at me. The hesitation in her tone returned.
"Are you angry?"
"I'm not angry," I smiled contritely. I regretted the words and actions that had made her fear my wrath. I would have said more, so much more, but how could I describe what I was feeling? The tremendous high I floated on was not something I could describe with mere words.
"Why not?"
"Well, I didn't hurt you for one thing. It was easier this time, to control myself, to channel the excesses, maybe because I had a better idea of what to expect." My eyes darted to the ruined headboard, and then back to her face. A new emotion was transforming her features into a beatific expression. Relief? Hope?
"I told you it was all about practice."
Yes, she had told me so. Being wrong was very satisfying. If only being wrong were always this incredible. I rolled my eyes as she gloated. Her stomach growled, ruining the moment for her. I chuckled at her sheepish look. "Breakfast time for the human?" I queried innocently.
"Please."
She hopped out of bed too quickly, and stumbled as her feet met the floor. I was out of bed in an instant, and caught her before she could fall, ensuring she was truly steady on her feet before relinquishing control. "Are you all right?"
If I don't have a better sense of equilibrium in my next life, I'm demanding a refund.
No refunds. However, I knew she was in for a pleasant surprise. How thrilling it was going to be to run, hunt, and fly through the trees with her at my side. Bella slipped into a kimono-like robe, walked quickly to the kitchen, and grabbed a frying pan. I snatched up the closest clothes, a pair of brown cotton pants, and a cream-colored button-down shirt. I didn't bother with the buttons, enjoying the feel of the hot, humid air washing over my skin. I watched as she cooked her own food, for the first time since our arrival. As deftly as I handled myself in the kitchen, it was only an illusion. I enjoyed cooking for Bella, but cooking itself held no pleasure for me. Bella moved with purposeful self-assurance as she prepared meals. I didn't think I could ever use the word silly to describe her again. There were too many subtle changes in her since we arrived on Isle Esme. I was growing increasingly attracted to confident Bella. I was surprised when she impatiently slid her eggs onto a plate and grabbed a fork after only a couple of minutes. "Since when do you eat eggs sunny side up?"
"Since now."
She was already scooping a forkful of food to her mouth. "Do you know how many eggs you've gone through in the last week?" I pulled the trash bin out from under the sink to show her. It was full of empty cartons.
"Weird. This place is messing with my appetite. But I like it here. We'll probably have to leave soon, though, won't we? To make it to Dartmouth on time? Wow, I guess we need to find a place to live and stuff, too."
She was rambling, but stopped long enough to take another steaming bite. She was thinking about our conversation last night. Obviously she was interpreting our spontaneous love-making as my agreement to her proposed deal. As much as I loved the idea of her remaining human, my earlier hesitation had been washed away last night. I could not allow her to go to Dartmouth under the assumption that she owed me anything. The thought of such a bargain tainted my blissful memories with guilt and shame. She was not indebted to me, not like that. I sat down next to her and spoke with a conciliatory tone. "You can give up the college pretense now. You've gotten what you wanted, and we didn't agree to a deal, so there's no strings attached." She snorted, a very unladylike sound, but cute for all its crass derision.
"It wasn't a pretense, Edward. I don't spend my free time plotting like some people do. What can we do to wear Bella out today?"
I chuckled without shame at her poor imitation of my voice, plotting and scheming.
"I really do want a little more time being human. I have not had enough."
She leaned toward me, and her voice lowered to a seductive purr as she ran her fingers across my bare chest. The smoldering fire within me burst into fresh flames, and I eyed her skeptically. "For this?" I caught her hand as it crept down my stomach. The fire was growing to the point of discomfort. If she persisted, I knew it would not be easy to distract her, and the cleaning crew was due very soon. I rolled my eyes at her and quipped sarcastically. Sex was the key all along. Why didn't I think of that? I could have saved myself a lot of arguments.
"Yeah, probably,"
she agreed with a laugh. "You are so human." My jab was more affectionate than mocking.
"I know."
Smug. Not a normal Bella reaction. She was sure about this. Staying human, going to college. My spirit was soaring as the next several months played out before me like one of Alice's visions. I felt my lips turning up in anticipation. "We're going to Dartmouth? Really?" My voice rang with excitement.
"I'll probably fail out in one semester,"
she cautioned me. I smirked in response to her sudden downcast expression. "Not very likely." "I'll tutor you. You're going to love college." My smile grew into an enthusiastic grin.
"Do you think we can find an apartment this late?"
"Oh, time for a confession." "Well, we sort of already have a house there. You know, just in case." I hadn't been able to bring myself to leave Bella to go house hunting, but Alice and Jasper had made the trip and found a beautiful, secluded, Victorian-style house. I was sure that Bella would be overwhelmed, at first, but the brick facade, elegant white columns, and private, partially wooded lot would capture her heart just as surely as it had mine. When Alice had shown me each of the homes, I knew right away it was perfect. Alice had bounced and clapped her hands.
"Oh, I knew it! Can I please, please, please handle the renovation and interior design? Oh, Edward, it's going to be so perfect!"
I had cautioned her that it would most likely never be used. However, she stubbornly insisted that we needed to be prepared for every eventuality, since her visions were known to change when new decisions were made. How had she known that this would be one of those cases? On subsequent trips, Alice coordinated and supervised the complete basement-to-rafters remodel. There was even an antique grand piano, waiting for me to try out my latest composition.
"You bought a house?"
Bella was still uncomfortable with my family's attitude about money. Real estate is a good investment. I downplayed the expense involved, what she didn't know. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't pursue the subject any further.
"So we're ready then."
When had she decided to take my eccentricities so lightly? Of course, she did not respond so favorably to all of my expenditures. "I'll have to see if we can keep your before car a little longer." I watched for her reaction.
"Yes, heaven forbid I not be protected from tanks."
I grinned at her scornful tone. So somebody had told her. I knew she hadn't been reading automotive magazines. That was a stretch, even for Bella's newfound flexibility of character. So The Guardian, as distasteful as she pretended it to be, was something she understood. Excessive on my part, perhaps, but she had evidently resigned herself to my attempts at protection.
"So how much longer can we stay?"
"We're fine on time. A few more weeks if you want. And then we can visit Charlie before we go to New Hampshire. We could spend Christmas with Renee." I was seeing a future that I had dared not imagine, before now. Bella did not have to abandon her human ties. She did not have to burn bridges, or experience the loss of her loved ones quite yet. I heard a distant hum, but it was growing louder every second. A motorboat was approaching the island.
"A few weeks?"
Bella pondered that for a moment.
"So I was thinking, you know what I said about practice before."
The suggestive tone was back, making my body tense up all over again. "Can you hold on to that thought? I hear a boat. The cleaning crew must be here. Let me explain the mess in the White Room to Gustavo, and then we can go out. There's a place in the jungle on the south side. With the cleaning crew here, maybe I could take Bella to that rocky peak. The view looking down on the crystal-clear ocean would be breathtaking during the daytime. Bella would love to see a bird's-eye view of the reefs, which she had been snorkeling over and around."
"I don't want to go out. I'm not hiking all over the island today. I want to stay here and watch a movie."
How could I deny her when she pushed out her lower lip and scowled at me like that? I refrained from laughing, sure that that would just make her angry. "All right, whatever you'd like. Why don't you pick one out while I get the door?" 2 human heartbeats were quite close, and there was a soft whispering sound of feet shuffling along the sandy path. One tread was heavier than the other. I was automatically translating Portuguese to English as I picked up on the first human thoughts I had heard in a week. "Newlyweds. I wish I could have given my wife something so incredible for our honeymoon. Young love. So hopeful and beautiful." The wistful thoughts of romance were at odds with the gruff tone of his mental voice.
"I really hope this doesn't take long. With Rosa sick and the baby crawling all over, I don't know how I'm going to keep up. But the wages, yes, they are good. These rich Americans, I wish I could resent them for their frivolous lifestyle, but we need the money. We need it so badly." Stress and worry colored the woman's thoughts, but her resolute attitude indicated a life of hard work and determination. She did not shy away from challenges. As 2 sets of feet sounded on the wooden steps, I could see images of her loved ones flashing through her mind. Her maternal instincts were stronger than most, making her the champion, protector, and nurturer of a variable gaggle of children, grandchildren, and younger relatives. "I didn't hear a knock,"
Bella pointed out. I cocked my head toward the front of the house, and was rewarded by a faint tapping at the door. I turned on my heel with a grin, while she shook her head and wandered over to the shelves that held Carlyle and Esme's DVD collection. I opened the door with a slight bow and words of welcome, spoken in clear Portuguese. I was glad for the recessed porch. My skin only glowed subtly in the reflected light. Bella's idea of a movie was the perfect excuse to stay inside. I could not risk being exposed by the sun. The man, Gustavo, had a stocky build. Deep lines crisscrossed his weathered face, dark from his heritage and decades of laboring under the brilliant tropical sun. He smiled and responded to my welcome with a heavy, gravelly voice. The other person, a slight woman who could have been anywhere from 45 to 60 years old, was observing me suspiciously. Her eyes narrowed, and I saw myself through her mind. My bronze hair was tousled and uncombed. My eyes were dark amber, rimmed with a thick black ring. My skin, so white compared to theirs, gleamed dully even in the shade. She saw me as beautiful, but terrifying. Multiple images flashed through her mind, primitive drawings of stunning but horrific creatures, fangs sinking into the tender throats of a young Indian woman. "Le Bichon," the word hissed through her mind. My mind echoed hers with the European derivative, incubus. This was not the first time somebody had seen one of us and questioned their eyes. Many observed enough for true superstitions to form. Cora was obviously part of a culture that still held on to the old stories. She was part Tacuna Indian. Like the Quileute Indians of the Olympic Peninsula, the Tacuna tribe must have had some encounter with a vampire far back in their history. Legends were passed down through the generations, a perpetual warning, to remind them of the evil that inhabited even their primitive world. My face was a mask of pleasant welcome, but I knew I would be monitoring every thought that flitted through her active mind. Already she had recovered her bearing, mentally chastising herself for her impolite reaction. She did not entirely believe in the stories, but the doubt was strong in her. She instinctively knew that I was something other. Gustavo and Cora followed me into the house, and I quickly rattled off the list of things that would need to be attended to. Gustavo replied that they had the items from my grocery list in the icebox on the boat, and would be bringing them up to the house after they had finished cleaning. We walked through the house, and I pointed out the task for each room. Then we entered the main room. Bella, her hair tumbling over her silk-clad shoulders, turned to greet us. Her face was tinged with pink, and my chest swelled with masculine pride at her stunning beauty. I introduced my beloved bride. Gustavo smiled at her, remembering his own wife as a young lady. Love, almost worshipful in its strength, made the memory glow. Cora, on the other hand, recoiled in shock. The image of a fragile figure, broken and drained of blood in the arms of a white-skinned monster, was painted boldly in her mind. Along with it, she thought of several other nightmares pictures, dark and forbidding, with a sinister aura. I saw Bella's eyes lock on her frightened face, and I motioned for the two Brazilians to follow me. I knew from experience that a reaction like hers was best treated with casual disregard. Reason and logic would quickly blur the suspicion. Human beings were too afraid of death to really want to believe in creatures like me. It was easier on the mind to brush the evidence away like an annoying insect. The truth was too horrific. I breezed past the blue bedroom, past the bathroom, and stopped in the large bedroom. I did not look at Cora, whose eyes were downcast as her mind whirled. Instead, I addressed Gustavo directly, forming an apologetic but shaky explanation for the feathery mess. He grinned at me with a knowing look and a shrug. I was mortified by the admiration in his thoughts. In that instant, he reminded me of Emmett. With a slight inclination of my head, I left them to their work, and rejoined Bella by the television. I wrapped her in my arms, feeling starved from being away from her side, even for a few short minutes.
"What's with her?"
Bella's urgent tone betrayed her concern for the small woman. I shrugged. Cora's part Tacuna Indian. She was raised to be more superstitious, or you could call it more aware, than those who live in the modern world. She suspects what I am, or close enough. They have their own legends here. The Libby Showman, a blood-drinking demon who preys exclusively on beautiful women. I ran my eyes suggestively over her face and body.
"She looks terrified."
She was not mollified by my cavalier attitude. "She is, but mostly she's worried about you."
"Me?"
The pitch of her voice rose dramatically. "She's afraid of why I have you here all alone." My laughter had a dark edge to it. The image of the vampire with his broken victim was fresh in my mind. Alice had once had a vision. I brushed off the remembered pain and dragged my attention back to the present. "Oh well, why don't you choose something for us to watch? That's an acceptably human thing to do."
Yes, I'm sure a movie will convince her that you're human.
She laughed as she rose up on her toes to wrap her arms around my neck. I leaned down to meet her kiss, but then lifted her in my arms. I forgot the presence of our guest, drinking in her sweet kisses. The torturous burning in my throat and lungs was nothing compared to the aching fire in my stomach.
"Movie schmovie,"
Bella muttered as I released her lips. My mouth traveled along her jaw, down her throat, tasting and savoring her exquisite flavor. Bella's fingers were twisting through my tangled hair, and I pressed her body closer to mine as I nuzzled her neck. A sharp gasp hit my ears. At the same moment, that terrifying vision of the demonic assault raced through Cora's mind. I put Bella down suddenly, whirling to meet the startled gaze of the petrified woman. Cora stood with feathers in her hair and a bag clutched to her chest. Her eyes darted back and forth between my face and Bella's, noting her dismayed expression and pink-tinged cheeks. Several of her earlier thoughts lingered, particularly the image of an Indian girl, unnaturally swollen with pregnancy, screaming out in terror and pain. The picture had the feel of an old childhood nightmare, not a true memory, but it was still very disturbing. No vampire, even the legendary incubus, had ever fathered children. If they did, it would surely have been a monster more horrible than its sadistic father. I could only imagine the hideous hybrid that would result from mixing vampire and human DNA.
"I'm so sorry,"
she murmured, as she regained control of her senses. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. It seemed that the sounder judgment of today's modern world was gradually winning, helped along by her humiliation. I used my most non-threatening voice as I smiled at her. "Not at all. We should be more respectful of your feelings. I'm afraid we're still a little love-struck." I feigned embarrassment. Let her think I was just self-conscious about being caught, being intimate with my wife. She accepted my apologetic explanation with downcast eyes, and continued swiftly from the house.
"She was thinking what I think she was thinking, wasn't she?"
Bella muttered, both annoyed and suspicious of the woman's reaction. "Yes," I smirked. Despite the stress of the situation, Bella's tangled sentence was still comical.
"Here, put this on and we can pretend to watch it."
Bella thrust a DVD at me. It was an old musical, one I vaguely remembered from the early 40s. She was too intimidated by the expensive entertainment equipment to even attempt to operate it. "Very honeymoonish," I nodded. I opened the case, inserted the disc, and pressed play. As I reclined on the sofa and Bella lay against me, I almost decided that the house really didn't need to be cleaned. They could just leave the groceries in the kitchen and go. I was sure Bella and I could handle anything that was pressing. My hair, my clothes, everything around me was saturated with her luscious scent. I made a conscious effort to pay attention to the film, but it was just a black and white blur on the large screen. The cheery soundtrack and vivacious voices were muted by the sound of Bella's blood rushing through her veins, setting my nerves alight.
"Will we move back into the white room now?"
Her voice broke through my reverie. I imagined her tiny figure, waiting for me on that big expanse of white silk, her long brown hair, sun-kissed skin, and the rosy flush of her cheeks were the only colors in the sea of white. She was dressed in the same simple, creamy nightgown, with the braided silk straps, that I had agonized over for hours our second night here, her mouth opening to release a sigh of anticipation as I approached the enormous bed. A lover's stage. She was waiting for a response. "I don't know. I've already mangled the headboard in the other room beyond repair. Maybe if we limit the destruction to one area of the house, Esme might invite us back some day."
"So there will be more destruction?"
Her mouth stretched into a wide grin of satisfaction. I laughed at her greedy expression. "I think it might be safer if it's premeditated, rather than if I wait for you to assault me again."
"It would only be a matter of time," she responded with an off-handed tone.
but her racing heart was drumming a staccato beat against my arm. "Is there something the matter with your heart?" This was not a healthy heart rate, even for a human as young as Bella. My assumption was tinged with true concern.
"Nope, healthy as a horse. Did you want to go survey the demolition zone now?"
From destruction to complete demolition. Oh, how her imagination traveled. "Maybe it would be more polite to wait until we're alone. You may not notice me tearing the furniture apart, but it would probably scare them." I was listening to Gustavo, humming under his breath as he dusted and wiped down the furniture. Cora was in the bathroom, scrubbing the tile vigorously. She was determined to focus on the task at hand.
"Right. Drat."
Bitter disappointment. Patience, my Bella. Her eagerness could not be as great as mine. The minutes crept by slowly. I shifted my legs, trying to avoid jostling Bella. Her breathing was regular, and her eyelids drooped. Gustavo's heavy steps approached, and I sat up to speak with him. "We're all finished, sir. Will you be requiring our services again next week?" Bella was startled by his gruff voice, and I cradled her in my arms, calmly stroking her smooth hair. "Yes, yes, we will be staying a while longer. I will notify you of our exact departure date, but meanwhile we would appreciate your services again next week." Gustavo nodded in agreement to my request, and Cora followed him silently to the door. "They're finished," I told Bella. She immediately perked up.
"So that would mean that we're all alone now."
Her eyes were bright, and her succulent lips curved into an expectant smile. My stomach lurched in response. So tempting. But it had been hours since Bella's meager breakfast. I subjugated my desires for her needs. "How about lunch first?" Her teeth dragged across her lower lip, leaving twin trails of redness. I wanted to lean in and caress her lips with my own. Soon, I reminded myself. Bella's hesitation was a clear indication that she was famished, but considering neglecting one hunger to feed another. With a smile, I grasped her hand and led her into the kitchen.
"This is getting out of hand."
Bella glared at her now empty plate. Despite the last week, I was still impressed by the quantity of food that had disappeared into her tiny frame. Of course, she had more muscle mass than before, but the increased curve of her hips and the gentle swelling of her chest were caused by more than just extra outdoor activity. I drank in her curves, loving the play of shadows and light across her silk robe, but perhaps, being a woman, she was more self-conscious about these changes in her body. "Do you want to go swim with the dolphins this afternoon? Burn off the calories?" I suggested mildly.
"Maybe later. I have another idea for burning calories."
"Really? Is it the same as mine?" "And what was that?" I asked innocently. I wanted to hear how she would propose her idea.
"Well, there's an awful lot of headboard left."
That did it. I had no more desire to swim than she did. I swept her into my arms, and silenced her with my eager lips. Dropping all pretenses of humanity, I flew into the bedroom, and the destruction began anew.